Much, first of all, for talking to Diplomatic Connections. And could I just ask start by asking you a little bit about your own personal background? How long have you been here in the United States?
Almost 2 years now. I arrived in September 2010 and presented the credentials to President Obama on September 16th.
And is this your first tour in the United States?
This is my second tour in the United States, the first as ambassador. I served again here between 1993 and 1997 as political counselor at the time.
And before you came here, you were in Cyprus, in Nicosia?
I came here from Sweden. I was ambassador of Cyprus to Sweden with a parallel accreditation to Norway and Latvia. I was there for nearly 5 years. Before that, I was in Nicosia, serving as the Chief of Staff of the Foreign Minister.
Well, could I just start by asking you about the rotating presidency of the EU? Cyprus now holds the rotating presidency until December, if I have this right.
Correct.
Well, can you define what that role actually is?
Indeed. Well, this is the first time that Cyprus is holding the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. As you'll appreciate, this is a historic occasion for Cyprus, being the first time that it assumes this role. We approach it with great seriousness. We attach great importance to it for self-evident reasons that we feel both proud and heavy with the burden of responsibility in assuming this role. But we pledge to do our utmost to promote the common European agenda. You know, Cyprus is a small country, has no agendas, certainly no hidden agendas of its own, so it will be acting as an honest broker to facilitate the furtherance of our common objectives in the European Union. Now, as you may know, since 2009, with the adoption of the Lisbon Treaty, the role of the rotating presidency has changed considerably. Yes. The common institutions of the Union, if we put it like that, have been strengthened and assumed a wider range of competencies, including in the area of foreign affairs, where we have Baroness Ashton as the High Representative, who is the primary official responsible for
more or less the equivalent of a foreign minister.
Our European foreign minister, right. The number that Mr. Kissinger can call
right, yes,
when he is in need. But at the same time, we have established the European External Action Service, so again, using term the foreign service or the diplomatic service of the European Union. Right. And in that context, then, the European Union delegations have assumed greater role, right. So, and to represent the Union abroad. And we, of course, cooperate very closely with the European Union delegation here, headed by Ambassador Almeida, yes. For whom I have the highest regard, and he's doing a great job in promoting our Union's policies and image here in Washington.
But the challenge for one of the smallest member states of the Union to take over the diplomatic activity of the presidency must be huge.
It is, yes, it's huge. I mean, as an example, we are going to be holding something like 185 meetings in Cyprus with 20,000 delegates participating. And on top of that, of course, there are hundreds of meetings in Brussels that will be taken. Still, the presidency presides over certain formations in the European Union. So we still have a lot of work to do. We have more than doubled our strength in Brussels. We are going to run, and we are running a presidency that is Brussels-based.
Right.
So most of the work will be coming out of our mission in Brussels. At the same time, our ministers are traveling to Brussels and elsewhere very frequently in order to preside over the councils according to their field of competency.
Now, usually the presidency country has a project or an agenda of its own, as it were, which it adds on to the diplomatic to the task that it has as president. What is Cyprus's, project?
Our agenda is the European
right.
Agenda, but of course every presidency has certain priorities. Our overall aim and our motto, so to speak, is for a better Europe. And in that regard, we would like to see Europe with greater solidarity and social cohesion, and a Europe that is far more efficient and growth-based in economic terms. So our priorities are for a more efficient and sustainable Europe, for a Europe that is more economically vibrant and growth-based, a Europe that is closer to its citizens, and a Europe that is closer to its neighbors and partners in the world. So these are the four main priorities, so to speak. But in addition to the ones that we put forth, a lot of the work of the presidency is predetermined, is what you might call inherited agenda.
Right.
It covers issues that are already on the calendar of the European Union. In our case, the primary one is the multi-annual financial framework for the period 2014 to 2020. That is the multi-annual budget, so to speak, of the Union. But it's not just the numbers, the budget. It's also the policies in many important fields, like in the area of cohesion or the common agricultural and fisheries policies, so issues of that nature. We already had a little success under our presidency. We have agreed the budget for 2013, and from your experience here, that agreeing a budget is not always the easiest of things, especially in difficult economic circumstances. There are some issues, perhaps, which I can refer to in particular. For example, we are all faced with a financial and economic crisis, and the sovereign debt crisis in the European Union is quite serious, and we are dealing with that. Our approach to that is for promoting a balanced approach, one that includes both the need for greater fiscal consolidation, so controlling budgets, austerity measures were needed, but in addition to that, provide for a growth-based economy, so that the engine providing the funds and the revenues for paying our debts, so to speak, is still there.
Right.
So both growth and fiscal consolidation. And in conjunction with that, also the need for greater integration within the Union.
But that is already happening as far as the economy is concerned.
Absolutely.
As the economic matters are concerned.
Absolutely. I think the last European Council of last June took very important decisions in all these fields, and I think that has provided the basis for work to be done in this current period to deal with the crisis and allow us to get out of this vicious circle of greater sovereign debt, greater assistance, greater austerity, and so on. We are doing our homework. We have done our homework both as the presidency and as the Union. Of course, we are very much aware that more work needs to be done. But I think the message that I would like to give is that we know what we have to do, and we are doing it.
But when you see it from here, from across the Atlantic, the situation looks extremely alarming, especially for certain countries. One mentioned at the moment, Spain, although the concern seems to shift from one country to the other. But is there a perception gap here? I mean, if are we outsiders, let's say, principally outsiders who are concerned, such as the United States, and who are involved in a way, are they sort of seeing it as too black?
I think there is an element of that. I think the work that is being done within the Union and the significance that it attached at all levels to dealing effectively with the crisis in the European Union may not be so much appreciated at all levels elsewhere. I'm sure that the US administration is well aware of the efforts that are being taken, but if you extend it to the markets, say it's not always easy to predict how the markets react or to understand how they are reacting. The volatility is quite characteristic there. But I think what we have to do is doing the right thing, doing the work, and in addition to that, try to explain what we are doing so that this perception gap that you correctly identified is reduced, if not eliminated. Both myself and my colleagues, the ambassador of the European Union, are giving that message very strongly, and we will continue to be doing that. At the same time, at the highest level, there is a very good interaction between the leadership of the US administration and the leadership of the European Union. In that regard, a number of common initiatives are being undertaken to try and promote growth in our community, in our transatlantic community. Because you rightly identified as what happens in Europe will significantly affect the US economy. And we've seen, of course, that what happens in the US economy significantly has affected Europe. Remember, the origins of the crisis go back to 2008, and at that time the major difficulties originated from the US.
What is the impact of the situation the economic situation in Greece on Cyprus, given the fact that you are close to the Greeks?
Well, of course, we have very close relations with Greece. I think the major issue here has been the wide exposure of Cypriot banks to the Greek debt. And following the decisions of earlier with regard to the so-called haircut, where lenders had to take a big cut on the...
I see, yes, yes. But that was in Greece.
But the haircut applied to them, the lenders, wherever those lenders
and there were Cypriot lenders?
Very much so. Two of the three largest Cypriot banks were quite exposed to that. A large part of their operations was based on this on Greek bonds, so they lost quite a bit, billions, and that has significantly impacted the Cypriot economy. These banks needed to be recapitalized, and that requires quite a substantial capital. And as a secondary consequence of that, the wider economy in Cyprus has been affected. And the fundamentals of the economy in Cyprus are very sound. As you may know, our economic history has been quite bright. So we are going through this difficult patch now because of this banking problem. But we are confident that with assistance from our partners in the European Union, the International Monetary Fund, and so on.
You had a bailout, in other words.
We are now in the midst of discussions with the European Commission, European Central Bank, and the International Monetary Fund for assistance for mainly going over the banking crisis, but also for any macroeconomic issues and challenges that we are facing. So as we speak, a team is in Cyprus discussing the program.
I see. Well, one more question about the economy, then we'll move on to other things. Worst case scenario for Greece, is there any danger that that would drag Cyprus into the same situation? And by worst case scenario, I'm talking about dropping out of the Eurozone.
Yes, I do not think so. I certainly don't. I hope that it will not happen for Greece. I know that they are very committed to stay within the Eurozone, and they're taking very tough measures with a lot of economic and social cost to the people. So their sacrifices are there, and I think they'll do their utmost to do what it has to be done to stay within the Eurozone. But even in the worst case scenario, I don't think Cyprus will be following in that route. But as I say, I'm convinced that it won't happen with Greece.
Because, of course, Cyprus went into the Eurozone very early after its accession into the European Union. Cyprus and Malta, I think, almost immediately joined the Eurozone.
Well, within 4 years of
whereas the other members of the group were still out. The Czechs, for example.
The Czechs are still out.
Yes, and Hungarians.
Slovenia was went in before Cyprus and Malta. Well, Cyprus acceded to the Eurozone because it fulfilled all the requirements. It was, remember, before the economic crisis. And we see that as a fundamental aspect of our position within the European family. Cyprus wants to be at the core of this project. And if I may add that the Euro is not just an economic project, it's also a political project. And I know that both Cyprus and Greece, but also the other partners in the European Union, would do their utmost to ensure that this project is successful. We don't want to see the whole European integration project starting to unravel. That will be both an economic and a political defeat. It will be a retrograde step, and it will be the first in 50 years, 60 years of continuous integration and great success, I must say. The whole European project has been of great significance for consolidating peace, stability, and cooperation on the European continent. Sometimes we take this for granted, but I think we should always reflect on it and appreciate its significance. And because of that, Cyprus, during its presidency, will maintain the focus on one aspect of that integration project, the enlargement issue. We do not believe that because of the financial and economic challenges, we should become inward-looking. We should maintain a focus towards our neighbors, both on the continent in the context of enlargement, but also our neighbors in the region. Cyprus being where it is, attaches particular importance to the southern neighbors, as we call them. Of course, anyone who listens to the news will immediately understand the importance of the area.
Yes, we'll get around to the enlargements in a minute, but about the ongoing UN initiated negotiations between Cyprus, Turkish Cyprus, Greek Cyprus, and the Turkish enclave, I think one would call it, in Cyprus. They seem, according to the Cyprus Mail, to be near deadlocked at the moment. Would you agree with that? And if so, what would be the primary areas of disagreement?
Yeah. Right. Okay. First of all, just to set the terms right, what we have in Cyprus is one country, the Republic of Cyprus that is recognized
Sure.
internationally, and is that country that is a member of the European Union and assumes now the presidency of the Union. It is the whole of Cyprus that entered the Union, the whole, including the part of Cyprus that is under Turkish military occupation since 1974.
Because there are still, what is it, 30,000 Turkish troops?
40,000 or so heavily armed Turkish troops there. But because of the continuing occupation, the application of the European acquis, the body of the laws
Right.
and the practices of the Union, are temporarily suspended from applying in that part until the solution of the Cyprus problem, and that part is called officially by the European Union as the part that is not under government control, or the part in which the government of Cyprus does not exercise effective control. So the negotiations that are, by the way, I think that was one of the greatest successes of the accession of Cyprus to the European Union, that it was the whole of the island that acceded to the Union. And I must stress here that all citizens of the Republic of Cyprus, both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, are full European Union citizens. So Greek Cypriot or a Turkish Cypriot who holds passport of the Republic of Cyprus can travel freely throughout Europe, settle freely throughout the European Union.
Can I just cut through this for 1 minute? Whereas the recognition of Cyprus as an entire country, it may be so, but to what extent do Turkish Cypriots now benefit from actual membership of the Union?
Well, as citizens of the Republic of Cyprus, fully, in the way that I described, anyone who has
in economic terms,
anyone who has a document of the Republic of Cyprus has the same benefits as anyone else. And Turkish Cypriots who wants to have a Cypriot passport obtains it, and then thousands and thousands have done so. Now, in economic terms, certain, because of what I mentioned before, because of the continuing occupation, the application of the acquis has been suspended in the occupied area. So certain of the programs cannot apply to the occupied area. Certainly, the unification of Cyprus will bring much greater and much needed benefits to all Cypriots, including the Turkish Cypriots. So there will be significant greater economic benefits accruing with the reunification.
About 30 years since the 1974 invasion of the Turkish paratroops, when I was there, incidentally, and watched them land, we're still, there is still an ongoing debate as to how this will be resolved.
Well,
and the latest talks, which begin not the 2004 ones, but now the 2008 ones, seem to have paused. Now, one reason for the pause, which the Greek Cypriot side is saying, is that, well, we're now handling the presidency, and that makes our people very busy.
Yeah. That's not correct. Quite the opposite. The government of Cyprus has explicitly said that the presidency responsibilities are no reason whatsoever to suspend the talks.
Nevertheless, the talks are not going on.
The talks are not going on, but not because the government of Cyprus or the Greek Cypriot side has said that. Quite the opposite. We have asked that the talks continue, and we have underlined the need to resume the talks. Quite the opposite. The talks have been suspended because of the reluctance of the leadership of the Turkish Cypriot community to continue the talks. It was that leadership, together with the government in Ankara, who have raised this issue and said that they will not continue the talks during the presidency of the European Union by Cyprus. Now, the talks, you asked about the talks.
I asked what the
Yes.
the enduring differences
Yeah,
were.
yeah. We attach the greatest priority in the efforts to resolve the problem. It is, as you rightly said, 38 years. And last week it was the 20th of July, the 38th anniversary of the Turkish invasion of Cyprus. We attach the greatest priority in ending that occupation, the de facto division of the island, of its people, and reunify Cyprus. I think that is only what is just, but also what is to the benefit of all Cypriots, both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. And in my view, and it is my firm conviction, that it will be to the best interest of Turkey as well, and will contribute significantly to consolidating stability in this volatile region of the Eastern Mediterranean. And I think in that way also serve the best interests of other important countries in the world, including of the United States of America. The talks have been going on, were resumed in 2008. At that time, the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community was Mr. Talat. The talks were re-energized after the election of President Christofias to the presidency of the Republic of Cyprus. And there is an international agreement on what the basis of that solution should be, and that was confirmed at the start of those negotiations. And the basis provides for the establishment of a bi-communal, bi-zonal federation with one single sovereignty, citizenship, and international personality, and political equality as the Security Council of the UN has defined that. So, in other words, for one state, Cyprus, of a federal, but one state, not two states. And I think that's where the fundamental difference in the negotiations has been. During these talks, the positions put forth by the Greek Cypriot side were consistent with this basis. Many of the positions that were put across by the Turkish Cypriot side, with the support and guidance of Ankara, were for two states, and instead of a federation, looking for a confederation. Initially, I must say, with Mr. Talat, there were some convergences, were agreements in certain fundamental areas, like parts of how the state would be governed, on European Union matters, on the economy, and so on. Not on security, not on territory and other things that were not discussed extensively. The problem has been after the assumption of the leadership of the Turkish Cypriot community by the current leader, Mr. Eroglu, who not only did not proceed to agree on further convergences, but even the convergences that were achieved beforehand were abandoned, and he backtracked. So since 2010, instead of going forth, we remained either at the same stalled, or even, as I mentioned, gone backward. And on the eve of assuming the presidency of the European Union, the Turks wanted to bring this to an end and use it as a deadline. So it was, as I mentioned before, the Turkish side that put this as a kind of stop. Neither we nor the international community agrees with that position. And then again, last week, when we had the renewal of the UN force in Cyprus, there were explicit calls for the resumption of the talks on the fundamental core issues.
The UN force in Cyprus, we should explain, is a United Nations peacekeeping force, which has been there since
48 years now.
Yeah, right, and it's sort of its initial purpose was to keep the two sides separate and to prevent clashes, I presume.
Yeah, as a peacekeeping force, its mandate was to prevent the eruption of violence and then also contribute to the restoration of normality, of normal conditions as it was proved.
And it's multinational, and over the years has seen an enormous number of nations sending contingents.
Indeed. The size of the force now is much smaller than it used to be. Now it's less than 1,000.
But at its height, it was what?
Well, more than 10,000.
Yes.
Yeah. So the force plays a very important role in Cyprus with the continuing occupation and the presence of more than 40,000 heavily armed Turkish troops. It performs an important function, both in the classic peacekeeping sense, but also in providing an interface so that the cooperation between the two communities on certain levels can take place. And it also performs an important humanitarian role in supporting enclaved Greek Cypriots living in the area that is under Turkish occupation, and also in other fields. For example, there is a UN committee on the missing persons in Cyprus, because unfortunately one of the tragic consequences of the invasion was the very large number of persons that were missing. Right. And from years there was no information or no identification, no ascertainment of their fate. And that committee is providing the forum for trying to identify the fate of the missing person.
And as far as differences, enduring differences is concerned, one of them is, of course, it seems to me, the compensation to Greek Cypriots for property on the other side that have been taken over.
Yes. Well, not compensation as such, but the issue of property is an important chapter in the negotiations. What are the fundamentals of the situation? The vast majority of the properties in the area under occupation were Greek Cypriot owned, simply because Greek Cypriots are about 80% of the population, and Turkish Cypriots about 20%. And important to recall that this kind of majority minority in terms of the population was observed throughout Cyprus. And like other areas of the world, there was no area in Cyprus that was predominantly inhabited by Turkish Cypriot community. So this kind of population distribution was seen throughout the country. And that was reflected in the property ownership as well. So the majority of the properties in the occupied area are Greek Cypriot owned. They have been under exploitation, illegal exploitation, since '74, given to settlers from mainland Turkey, and we have hundreds of thousands of Turkish settlers imported into Cyprus or sold to foreign buyers. Now, it's important to know that the European Court of Human Rights has repeatedly found that the ownership of these properties remains with their original owners. So the fact that they have been illegally taken over by whoever does not confer ownership to them. Now, of course, in the context of a settlement, these owners may decide that they don't want to return to their properties.
I see.
So they may seek instead compensation,
Right.
or they may seek to exchange them with another property somewhere else in Cyprus.
Right.
Or, of course, they may decide that they want to return to their
Go back.
properties. So that is the fundamental position on this issue. You may have heard of instances where some of these properties were bought by foreigners,
Right.
and they were taken to court, and the court, of course, found in favor of the original owner, and those who bought it illegally had to pay damages. But damages for the loss of use of property, not for compensation as expropriation. It's, the European Court of Human Rights found in that regard as well.
Mr. Downer, the UN envoy to the talks, has said, however, that many convergences have been reached, and he suggests that these convergences have been sustained. What sort of convergences is he talking about?
Yes, quite right. As I mentioned before, especially during the initial phase of the negotiations when Mr. Talat was the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community, there were significant convergences achieved. For example, on the federal structure of the government, how Cyprus would be governed, how to elect various organs of the federal government, on presentation and relations with the European Union, on the economy, a single economy, a single central bank of Cyprus. Those convergences were quite important in that they showed that it is possible to reach a settlement. But again, as I mentioned before, those convergences were not reconfirmed when Mr. Erdogan became leader, and in fact went back on a number of these.
But life has changed in many ways, has it not? I mean, in terms of the relationship between the two communities. There's a great deal, I'm told, I have seen it myself, because I've been there for some time, but I'm told that there's a great deal more crossing of the two sides.
Well, in the aftermath of the invasion in '74, there was strict segregation, forced segregation by the Turkish army of the two communities.
Green line.
The famous or infamous
Green Line.
Green Line. And more than 200,000 Greek Cypriots were forced to flee their homes. They were about 75 to 80% of the population living in that area were forced to flee that area, including my family. And in the aftermath, the so-called Green Line was really airtight, and nothing could cross. Only the UN could, and then some foreigners. And that situation was imposed by the Turkish army until 2003. And the government of Cyprus never prohibited the movement of going on. But the Turks would not allow that. Now, in 2003, in the aftermath of Cyprus signing the accession treaty to the European Union, there was a relaxation of these restrictions. Now, since that time, there have been indeed millions and millions of crossings, both sides, both ways. It's very gratifying to observe that with these millions of crossings, there has never been a single violent incident. And that's important. Why is it important? It demonstrates that the continuation of the problem is not because of any kind of incompatibility between the two communities, that the two communities cannot live together. And that puts an old statement by the, remember that former Turkish Cypriot leader Rauf Dektaş.
Of course, yes.
Well, how wrong he was, because he used to say that if you allow Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots to mix freely,
Yes, they will.
Cyprus will make Bosnia look like a pygmy.
Yes.
How wrong, I'm glad to say, he was. I mean, we always knew that,
Right.
but the facts on the ground demonstrate that. So, and Cypriots, both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, have lived together for centuries, and so they have many things in common, far more in common than what divides them. And the interaction and the willingness and to come together has been quite impressive and very welcome.
Is there a generational factor here? I mean, after all, you're talking about people who were not born in 1974 and were
Yes.
not born even 20 years later. So.
Of course, yes. Many who were born after 74 or even were
Don't
young before
understand what it's
74,
all about.
they never had any interaction
Right.
with the other community. So that, again, now they have had that opportunity. And there are many bicommunal groups, people
Sure.
coming together, various professional groups, youth organizations. So there is a lot of interaction there. At the same time, the older generation has had experiences of one another.
Right.
Of course, some negative because
Mhm.
of the conflict and what you might have, the tragic consequences of that. But also, they had the positive experiences, the actual experience of living together. So I think the coming together is only a positive development, and I believe that it's one of the factors that would all go well for the future. The primary problem is not the problem is not intercommunal. It's not. It's essentially the problem has been since '74 one of invasion and occupation by a third country, and it is, I think, the role of Turkey that has to be underlined, because they are the dominant power in the occupied area. They have political, economic, and certainly military control of that area. And the key to a solution in Cyprus is in Ankara. If Ankara decides to cooperate constructively for the solution of the Cyprus problem, we'll find a solution very quickly.
Mhm.
So what negative developments we saw in Cyprus in the negotiations did not come out of the blue. They were with the support and direction of the government in Ankara. And I repeat it, we do feel very strongly that a solution in Cyprus, as we described it, of a federal form, of a one state, with no foreign troops in Cyprus, with Cyprus a member of the European Union, where all fundamental freedoms and human rights are guaranteed, will also be to the benefit of Turkey. And that, as one example would be that I could give you, is that Turkey is a candidate country for accession to the European.
That was going to be my next question,
Good.
which is, how does Turkey's aspiration to join the European Union impact on the situation in Cyprus, given the fact that Cyprus is a fully fledged member of the EU, an institution the Turks want to join?
I think we view it in a positive way, in a positive light. I think fundamentally provides a positive framework, the incentives, possibility to play the role of a catalyst for Turkey to do the right thing in Cyprus, because it will be to its own interest. You're absolutely right. Cyprus is a full-fledged member of the European Union. The decision to start accession negotiations with Turkey was taken with the concurrence of Cyprus. It could not have been taken if Cyprus had said no. So it's important to recall that. Because sometimes there is misunderstanding that Cyprus would not wish to see Turkey as a member of the European Union. And quite the opposite. Cyprus supports the accession perspective of Turkey. But Turkey has to fulfill its obligations vis-à-vis the European Union and all its member states. And the problem with the accession negotiations of Turkey has been Turkey's failure to comply with those obligations. A candidate country is like any other candidate country. What holds for some Western Balkan candidate country must hold for Turkey as well. They cannot get a pass from on their obligations. And we very much regret that Turkey has continuously refused to implement what is called the additional protocol to the customs union,
which is to allow Cypriot ships
and their aircraft to use Turkish ports and airports. And that's one of the obligations that Turkey undertook when it opened the accession negotiations. So it was an explicit commitment, has not fulfilled it. And because of that failure, a number of chapters have been frozen.
Right.
But Turkey has also failed to respond to the call of the European Union to normalize relations with all its member states, including the Republic of Cyprus. There has been no progress on that, quite the opposite. Turkey, for example, blocks the accession of Cyprus to any international organization to which Turkey is a member and holds the power of veto, and that extends across a number of organizations, and that I think it's important to know.
For example, GATT?
For example, GATT, we used to be, so the WTO, so we are there.
Right.
But no, for example, the OECD, the organization of the
UNESCO, maybe?
Again, Cyprus was a member of UNESCO before. Turkey blocks Cyprus accession organizations in which it is a member and Cyprus is now sitting. Like the OECD, some arms control regimes, which is like the Wassenaar arrangement, or the control of missile technology. And these are important organizations for our world's sake. These are initiatives that purport to make our world safer. And Turkey blocks Cyprus, or even in innocuous organizations like the International Meteorological Organization. So, and that's because Turkey refuses to recognize the Republic of Cyprus. Now, that is a fundamental problem in that if you want to become a member of a club, you need to recognize all the members of that club. I think it's evident. Nevertheless, we feel that this accession prospect does have a positive dynamic, and we hope it will work in the end. And in that context, we would expect Turkey to contribute constructively, as it has been called upon by the European Union, contribute constructively to the efforts to resolve the Cyprus problem. I think you will agree with me that there is no way Turkey can join the Union and continue to occupy part of the Cypriot territory. It's not possible. But we now, as in the presidency of the Union, we have said that if Turkey cooperates, we'll respond positively and promote its accession process.
How about the position of the United States vis-à-vis your attempts to come to some form of solution in the Cyprus problem?
Well, the United States is quite explicit on its position on the matter. Last week we had the confirmation hearing for the new US ambassador to Cyprus, and that provided the most recent occasion to reiterate that. And it's quite clear the United States support the resolution of the Cyprus problem with the establishment of a bizonal, bicommunal federation. So in fact, the question was specifically asked, partition or reunification? And the answer is quite clear, reunification of Cyprus. So we feel that the United States has a very important role to play. We welcome that support, but I think given its role as the main global power and the influence that it has with many players, it can play a very positive role and perhaps even more dynamic role in promoting this resolution. I strongly believe that the Cyprus that is reunited and is free of the control or domination of another country will serve the best strategic interests of the United States. And such a solution, of course, is consistent with the fundamental values for which this country stands for.
How does the Arab Spring, so-called, and now particularly what's going on in Syria, which is hardly spring-like, affect Cyprus? How does it impact on Cyprus?
Well, Cyprus is the member of the European Union closest to these areas. It's the closest country to Syria, Lebanon, Israel, of course. Egypt is not far off. So we have followed this very closely. In fact, in the context of our priorities as the presidency of the European Union, we have stressed the importance of promoting the role of the European Union in dealing with the Arab Spring, with establishing closer relations with key players in the area, and supporting the democratic transitions in these countries. And as an example, we feel that the strengthening of the relations and cooperation between the European Union and the Arab League would be particularly helpful and constructive. And in that context, we are going to have a meeting of the foreign ministers of the Arab League and the European Union in November, to be held in Cairo. It is our immediate neighborhood, and when I say ours, I mean both of Cyprus and of the European Union.
Is this the first EU-Arab League foreign ministers meeting?
It will be the first such meeting at the level of foreign ministers. We had a meeting a month or two ago with the Secretary General of the Arab League in Brussels, but this is going to be the first.
Really?
Yeah. So it's important.
This is a Cyprus initiative.
This was a Cyprus initiative, but it will be, of course, under the auspices of the whole of the European Union and Baroness Ashton. So it's an important initiative, but it demonstrates the importance of developing various channels of communication with key institutions in the area. Cyprus has managed, and I think it's an important element to note, to have good relations with all its neighbors, except Turkey, of course, because of Turkey's due to Turkey's possibility, but both with the Arab countries and with Israel. Cyprus has had good relations, and I think that provides Cyprus with the ability to bring a new light to the situation and then act as a facilitator for promoting positive developments in the area. Of course, we are all very much concerned with the crisis in Syria. There is no question that has to be dealt with. We support the position of the international community for the so-called Annan plan for Syria. At the same time, we don't want to see the greater militarization of the conflict. I think that would be at increasing humanitarian cost to the people of Syria, and the full-fledged civil war can only be worse.
Are there Syrian refugees coming to Cyprus?
Well,
the way Lebanese refugees came to Cyprus in the 70s and the 80s?
We have not seen any as yet, but the potential is of course there. Cyprus, you rightly recall the 2006 situation with Lebanon, when Cyprus acted as the main center for coordinating evacuation of foreign citizens from Lebanon. Again, we are prepared to do that again if it needs to be done in cooperation with our partners in the European Union. Various scenarios are being looked at, and one talks of something like 200,000 foreign citizens, European citizens and citizens of third countries having to be evacuated from Syria and possible destination of Cyprus. We would need, I mean, you can appreciate this is a large number, and it would happen within a short span of time if it happens. We would need the assistance and coordination with the European partners, and we're looking at that. But you're right, you're quite right to point out that there might be Syrian refugees as well, and that is one of the other reasons why Cyprus might be affected, and the European Union would be affected as well. And we fear that, you know, if you go into full-scale civil war in Syria, it will not be restricted to Syria only. It will expand to spread to neighboring countries, and again, that will have effect on Cyprus. So we as an international community, we need to take the right approach to prevent the worst from happening, and set the way for positive developments in all these countries.
Can I just end with a cultural question? Cyprus, of course, has a wealth of archaeological sites.
Before we do that, since we're talking about the neighbors, if I may mention the importance of Israel and how close the relations are with Israel, and how they have developed in the last few years. They were always good, as I mentioned before, but they have gone from strength to strength, and we are cooperating in a number of areas. The one that is most well known these days is the energy, with the significant finds of natural gas deposits in the area, which again is very important not only for Cyprus and Israel, but for the region and for the energy security, we feel, of the European Union. That's a very positive development. Can help again with promoting the prospects of cooperation in the region, and even act as another incentive finding a solution to the Cyprus problem that reunifies
the natural gas is in significant quantities.
It's in significant quantities, as the experts here call it. It's world class.
And what areas is it in?
Cyprus has concluded agreements for delimiting its exclusive economic zone with its neighbors to the south east, Egypt, Israel.
And what areas of the Mediterranean do you?
It's between Cyprus and Israel, possibly Lebanon, possibly Egypt. The finds that have been confirmed.
They are at sea, obviously.
They are at sea, yes, of course, yes. I should have mentioned that. They are at sea. But it seems that the experts have no fears about the technical possibility of exploiting this. Already started in some fields in Israel. Glad to say, with the involvement of an American company on both the Cypriot and Israeli sides.
I see. And on the Cypriot side too. because of the distances, of course, are not large, and therefore there's a question of
with the
jurisdiction, I presume.
Indeed, and that's why it was important to delimitate the exclusive economic zones, and we did that very carefully and deliberately on the basis of international law, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, up to maximum 200 miles. If it's less than that, it's the method used is the median line, and that's what's used for Egypt, for Israel, and for Lebanon.
Because the distance between Egypt, between Cyprus and Israel is
less than
400 miles.
Yes. So we had to do that, and we're glad that the agreements with Israel and Egypt are in force. With Lebanon, we have ratified it. We still wait for the Lebanese parliament to ratify it. There is a problem there, not to do with Cyprus, and we hope that it will be overcome soon.
Right. So the cultural question, which is actually that we know about the wealth of archaeological sites in Cyprus. We know about the wealth of Cyprus archaeology, a lot of which is to be found in New York at the Metropolitan Museum, thanks to Luigi Cesnola, who was US consul and who carted away quite a lot of stuff and became first director of the Metropolitan Museum. But
and on the strength of that, established the Metropolitan
Museum. And on the strength of that, established the Metropolitan Museum. But Cyprus has never gone the Elgin Marbles route, as it were, has it? In other words, you've never actually made strong claims to return those artifacts from Metropolitan.
Yes, not those, because Cesnola's activities happened
in the 19th century.
In the 19th century, or other finds from excavations in Cyprus were taken out of the country before the independence of Cyprus in 1960, and the legislation of the colonial administration, or in the case of Cesnola during the Ottomans. But we attach the greatest importance to the protection of our cultural heritage. I can assure you of that, and in fact I can report that we had a very positive development recently, about 10 days ago, when the memorandum of understanding that we have between the US government and the government of Cyprus for the protection of cultural heritage, through which the United States imposes import restrictions on cultural treasures from Cyprus, essentially archaeological objects and Byzantine era ecclesiastical, like icons and ritual ethnological material, are imposed unless you have the appropriate documentation accompanying it. That memorandum was extended for another 5 years, 10 days ago. We're very grateful and appreciative to the US government of that.
Right.
In that context, I think it's very important to mention the systematic destruction of the cultural and religious heritage of Cyprus that has occurred in the aftermath of the Turkish invasion. The cultural heritage of the occupied area has been systematically desecrated, destroyed, illicitly trafficked in the black market. A lot of it has ended up in the United States. And there you can see the importance of this agreement that we have with the United States. You may recall back in the 80s a case that made history here, the famous Kanakaria mosaics of the 7th century, from a little church from a village in the Karpas Peninsula, in occupied Cyprus, which an art dealer here in the United States bought them on the black market, but we found out about it, both the Church of Cyprus, because they were mosaics from the Church, and the government of Cyprus. They went to court, and the Annapolis Federal Court found in favor of them of returning those to its legal owner, and those did return to Cyprus. So the issue of repatriation of cultural treasures is right at the top of the agenda in Cyprus. We feel that the protection of cultural heritage, because it's an age-long cultural heritage, we go back 11,000 years.
Right.
By the way, to mark our 50th anniversary establishing the independence of Cyprus, we held here at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History the largest exhibition ever held abroad.
I saw it.
Yes. You saw it, and that was the that was the cover of
the catalogue.
The catalogue, yes.
Catalogue is on air, right?
Yes. So no, it's important to. It's not just Cypriot cultural heritage; it's global cultural heritage. So when I see this important global heritage being affected in a negative way, where in Afghanistan or Mali, as we saw recently, I feel personally hurt.
Ambassador, on behalf of Diplomatic Connections, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much.